You're listening to Remotely We Are One, a podcast to help inspire others to take their lives back from the office commute. I'm Rick, a passionate beer rep who loves the industry but hates the commute.
And I'm Kaleem, a remote work advocate and consultant. We're going to speak with some of the top professionals who have managed to avoid the commute as they share stories from the most inspiring to the most comical, all while working remotely.
Man, this sounds exciting. Let's clock in.
I've got some great stories of shitting my pants at conferences. I got E. coli during F8, and that was
God
quite an
damn.
experience.
Are you serious?
Wow.
Yeah, man. If you ever want to really respect your butthole, get E. coli. It is, dude. I'm telling you, man.
Respect the butthole.
I just the ability though for
The ability.
your anus to
twitch.
keep stuff in during the day is so impressive because you notice the day when it can't keep things in anymore.
Yeah.
And you can't fall asleep because every 3.5 minutes you're going, oh no, not again, and then running to the bathroom and just acid all over the back of your legs.
Oh my gosh.
It was horrible.
Gosh.
Oh, yeah. It was terrible.
Welcome back, everybody, to Remotely We Are One. Now celebrating their 1,000th download, I might add.
Oh my gosh.
Wow. It's big time.
I am Rick. Yes. Joining me, as always, is Kaleem, who is also proud of that 1,000th download. How you doing, man?
I can't even get the words out right now. We did hit 1,000 downloads. Thank you all.
That is a milestone.
It is a milestone. I can't even believe that many people would want to listen to us that many times. I mean,
Yeah.
990 of them are definitely me replaying the episodes.
It's just one person really a big fan. Yeah.
He's really into it. He's going places.
But thank you all for listening. We really do appreciate it. Thank you, Rick, for joining me on this endeavor. It's actually been super, super fun and can't wait to get more guests on and talk even more.
I'm excited for today's episode. I'll tell you that much.
You're always excited, though.
No, but this one, we'll be able to highlight in the pre-show exactly why I'm excited for this show.
Yeah, I'm excited too. I've been hounding him for a while. He originally told me just leave me alone. I don't want to talk to you anymore. But I'm consistent, Rick. I kept coming at him, and finally, I had to actually message him through his own app in order for him to get back to me, which is pretty genius, by the way. But let me tell you about today's guest. First off, he's representing Florida. He didn't just move to Florida. He's a native Floridian. Is that right? Okay. All right, let's go with it. We learned this is interesting. He lives outside the largest cow operation in the U.S. And I don't know if it's a coincidence, Rick, but it also happens to be home to the busiest Dairy Queen on the East Coast. What do you think?
No way.
Yeah. So cows.
There's no way that's a coincidence. I'm sorry.
Lots of cows, moo, lots of those, milk, and then also the busiest Dairy Queen. Now, where we're from, Rick, Dairy Queen closes in September because that shit's cold. They just shut all the doors. They shut all that shit down.
There's two things you don't do after Labor Day in Maine. You don't wear white pants, and you don't go to Dairy Queen. That's it.
Reconfirmed.
Yeah.
He actually IPO'd his first startup at 19 years old.
That's impressive.
Doogie Howser ain't got shit on him.
Nothing.
He has been... Go ahead. What's that, Rick? What's that?
He got nothing. Doogie Howser got nothing.
Nothing. Take that, Doogie. He's been featured in Business Insider, TechCrunch, Wall Street Journal, and The Verge. Last but not least, he is the founder of YAC, which is an asynchronous meeting tool for teams. Listeners, viewers, please give a warm welcome to Justin Mitchell.
All right. Welcome, sir.
Hurrah.
Welcome.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. We've spent the last 10, 15 minutes talking about absolutely nothing related to my industry and only things about me personally. So it'll be exciting to see the direction this episode goes.
Well, we are nothing but professionals here, as you know.
Okay,
So let's get down to brass tacks, shall we?
let's do it.
The brass talks.
I don't even know where to take that now. I'm just kind of like, okay, well, let's just run with it.
Go
so,
for it.
yeah. So, Justin, tell us a little bit about the spark that made you transition to remote work at the beginning and how it kind of led to the concept of YAC.
I'm going to show some privilege here and say I've never really gone into an office. Like, I started working in the industry at 16, I think, maybe 15. Yeah, maybe 15. And, that meant I was in high school. So I couldn't go to an office every day. Then I was a designer for a startup here in Florida. And I maybe showed up to the office once or twice a week to, I don't know, turn something in or brainstorm with somebody on the team. But I had school full time, so I couldn't go to the office. And then after that, I had a couple more startups. And I think our office was just Panera Bread when I was 17 and 18. And then when I started my own company, I just never showed up. We just always did everything kind of remote. I don't know. I like my house, my room, my desks, my lighting, my AC. I've always worked best in my own environment. I'm working to coin a phrase called personal productivity, which is just this idea that like each individual person should work in the best way that they feel fit, instead of having a company like mandate the time and the place that they work. But so I've always worked remote. And so YAC was just sort of like this extension of the way I'd always done things. And I've had an agency called So Friendly for the last, I don't know, 5-6 years. And I always had that remote. We hired from all over the world. And YAC was built inside that agency to kind of mimic how I thought people should be meeting, which was non-scheduled, non-interruptive, non-time monopolizing meetings. I was trying to figure out a way for people to just talk more during the day using their voice that doesn't include a phone call or a scheduled Zoom call. And so the YAC was just kind of this natural next step evolution of the way I'd already figured out work.
Could you expand upon what, for our listeners, what YAC stands for? It's an acronym. What does it stand for?
It is an acronym. So the story behind the name is we were building YAC originally as a hackathon project for Product Hunt. And it was originally a walkie-talkie. So you just press a button on your computer and your voice blurts out of somebody else's laptop. And in remote work, one of the things I was trying to solve was this idea of, inside of an office environment, you could always just kind of like shout across the room and somebody like, hey, what do you need? And you could just like ask them, whatever question you had for them. And so I told my designer, Heather, I was like, I want a name that just says yelling across cubicles. And she goes, well, YAC, YAC. And I was like, oh shit, that's so good. Like, that's good. It. That literally is what it is.
Hey, Rick, what are you doing over there, buddy?
Yeah, yelling across cubicles.
Get the fuck off my back. I'm trying to do my job.
Can we yell in whispers? Let's yell in whispers. Let's just
it's
yell
all
in
caps.
whispers.
You're
Hushed
just
tones.
speaking in all caps.
Hushed tones.
Yeah.
That's great.
So your name, I actually just assumed YAC was talk.
Well, so that was the
Yakety
thing that I
yak.
loved about it is as a kid, I had a device called a Yak Back, which in retrospect is a horrible toy. Like, it makes no sense. It was literally just an audio recorder that you just record your own voice on, and then you press a button and it would play it back.
Yak
Like,
back.
I don't
You're
actually
right.
understand any use case or why I loved this toy as a kid, but I had a Yak Back and I could record me saying something and then press a button and it would just like play it out of a speaker. And so I personally associated YAC with talking, right? And so YAC, when that kind of name popped, I was like, oh, it's perfect because it's an acronym that says exactly what I wanted it to say. And it technically means to kind of like gab or talk or, prattle on.
Perfect.
Plus I got a three-letter domain out of it, right? Like,
Yes.
what's the likelihood of me ever owning a 3-letter domain in my life? I never thought that would happen.
No, that shit was available?
No, definitely not.
Oh.
One day I'll teach a masterclass on how you talk somebody down from a $500,000 domain sale.
I can't imagine how that works.
It was for sale. Somebody else owned it. I spent like a year record searching them and emailing them. Ended up getting a domain broker involved, and we got a absolutely killer price on a 3-letter domain. I mean, just a number no one would even believe.
So tell me a little bit about that experience, because I've actually had domains that I really needed and wanted, but I couldn't do it. And I just thought that like this domain broker was like a lawyer who's going to charge me all kinds
jack
of
it up
money.
a little bit, get the cut.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think it's a total normal fear. I always thought that as well. You know, in retrospect, I don't know that she did anything that I couldn't do on my own, but like she's skilled at it and knows how to get in contact with these people and has access to tools that I don't have. And it was totally worth it in the end. When I'm naming something, when I'm going through a brand search, it's a huge part of what I'm doing early on is literally just the process of like ensuring the domain is available. And by available, I typically mean not being used. I would say that like any high value dictionary term or any, short URL, like it's taken. You cannot just buy that domain. So I'm mostly checking to make sure it's not in use. Is there a brand actively using it that I would have to fight for SEO traffic with? In this case, there wasn't. So my thought was, all right, well, if I get the thing big enough, I could always have enough money to buy the name out from under whoever owns it. They will want to sell it to me. Luckily, we did that before we got big enough that they could see the size of my checkbook and start to really jack that price up.
Hey, you want to talk about why remote work is so great? We're sitting here recording a podcast, and I just got up and left, Rick. I just got up and left because my iPhone 13's arrived. So listen,
is that one for each hand? Or
it's one for each hand. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's like, you have to be flexible. You have to be able to know how to do work-life integration, and that's what we're about, Rick. That's what we're about here.
Absolutely.
My goodness. How lucky are we?
We are pretty lucky. I think you started off with privilege, and
yeah,
I got a couple of questions for you, Justin, in regards to like how it started. So you originally pitched this idea at Product Hunt. Shout out Product Hunt. So many great things from there. Just double shout out. Ryan, thank you for making that shit. So you pitched this at is it a festival? Was it a Makers Festival in 2018?
Makers Festival. I call it a hackathon.
Okay, hackathon.
Honestly, I think I misunderstood the first version of this.
Because
no one else built like a functioning tool. They basically made like fake landing pages with like product shots and copy. I built like a landing page with copy with product shots, a back end, a front end, a downloadable desktop experience. Like it was a fully functioning like social network for remote workers. And I didn't recognize that I wasn't supposed to put all that effort in. So I don't think we won because it was the best idea. I think people had pity on us. They were like, oh shit, this guy didn't read the rules and he built a whole startup in 3 days. I think we have to give it the award.
Well, you got to get a little more credit than that, man. Because then after you do that pitch, you receive 500,000 from Slack.
Yeah. So the way that this went down is really interesting. And as I was thinking about just like good stories that relate to kind of the YAC origin stories. So we're at CES and we're sitting in a hotel room.
And CES is what for some of our listeners that don't know?
Consumer electronics show. So okay. I'm a geek. I like to see VR headsets and Fitbit trackers and all that cool technology. So I always go every year. And when we were an agency, I was going for clients, right? Like we'd show up, we'd walk up to a booth and we'd be like, hey, you're doing a smart ring. You need an app for that. I'd love to build your app. I don't know. It's just an easy way to get in front of customers, in real life.
Did it work?
We're sitting back at a hotel. Yeah, it worked. Absolutely. I wouldn't.
You don't know me? I'm Doogie Howser, dog. You gave me the introduction.
Not that like I don't like Vegas and being at a table all night, but I wouldn't go if it wasn't working. We'd go every year, and it worked. And we're sitting in this hotel room, and I get this mention on Twitter, and now like I'm checking Twitter a million times a day, and I'm getting right now I'm just getting a bunch of Moonbirds spam on my account.
Please, for the love of God, Twitter, please stop this bullshit
absurd.
Moon thing, man. Like we know that our followers are tweeting because we follow them. You don't need to tell me that they are tweeting. Sorry about that, rant. Twitter, please fix this shit.
Yeah. So I'm not used to getting notifications at this time. Now I'm like over inundated with them and annoyed. But at the time I was like, I have a mention on Twitter. Like this never happens. And somebody had said like, hey, you should talk to Justin. His project YAC would be perfect. And I like scroll up and it's this VC saying, hey, I want to fund somebody doing something in audio. And I was like, oh, cool. literally this guy DMs me the next like 5 minutes, is like, what's your cell phone number? I'm going to give you a call. Gives me a call and he's like, hey, how would $100,000 sound to get you started? And I mean, at this time, and we've talked about privilege. We'll talk about it again. But at the time I was like, oh my God, $100,000. Like, that's life-changing money. Like, I don't know what I would do with 100,000. I mean, that is just so much money now. Like our latest, Series A round, someone offered to write us a check for $100,000. And we were like, well, I don't think I need an extra $100,000. It's not worth the paperwork alone. Right. Like, just like shrug it off. But at the time, $100,000 was just like bonkers money to me.
Of course.
I was like, sure. What do you need? He's like, well, like send me a pitch deck, company info, and we can make this real quick. I can turn around a check. And I'm like, yeah, I don't have any of this, man. Like, we built that project over the course of 3 days, Thanksgiving break. Like, I don't have a pitch deck. I have a website that we built in like a couple hours. Like, this isn't even a real company. Like, I just built this as a product out of my own agency. He's like, well, spin some of that stuff up and, we'll get going. We went a couple months talking, and then he got BetaWorks involved, who at the time was like one of my favorite venture capital firms because they'd funded like Spotify and the Gimlet Media guys who do my favorite podcasts. And they were involved in a lot of cool audio stuff. And so I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. So we closed $275K without like a company, a pitch deck, customers. I mean, we'd been really fortunate that during the product hunt thing, like a lot of cool companies had downloaded our stuff. Like, we had like Google and Envision and Barstool Sports and ABC Television and stuff had all downloaded YAC. We built it so scrappy that we didn't really have any analytics on it, but we knew they downloaded it because we got like the email notification when they hit the button on our website. And so we were able to like leverage some of those names to say, wow, these people are actually down. And then we went and talked to them, and like Roche Healthcare was an enterprise health startup or health company. We're asking them, like, I don't think of you as a remote company. Like, you're not, I don't know, any of these like famous remote enthusiasts like the Envision guys or, any of that, or Basecamp team. This is Roche Healthcare. They're like a boring health startup. And they're like, oh no, actually we run the insurance claims department or whatever. We all work from home. I was like, oh, that's interesting. I didn't think of like this big enterprise company is actually having remote employees. And like, yeah, we're using it to talk back and forth. It's great. And that's kickstarted this, I don't know, snowball effect of funding, offers, customers, press, newsletter mentions, blog mentions, et al. And it just built a startup out of nothing. I had no intentions of building a company, and boom, all of a sudden I had one, and I had funding, and we've raised $10 million so far.
That's amazing. That's amazing, bro. I mean, it's such a success story. You hear them all the time. But like to actually sit here and have you tell the story first, your pre-show conversation set it off perfectly. But then just kind of hear how it all came to fruition. I love the part you were talking about how you were a student, so you had to work remotely because you had to go to school. I had
no choice.
That is so great, man. Like, so all you young bucks out there, you can build something while you're in school, man. Take advantage. You don't have to go to the job, but you got to go to school. Hopefully Panera Bread doesn't kick you out. But in regards to Slack funding you, I'm a little curious right now, Justin. Like,
it's a good story.
It's a good story, but now Slack's Slack.
Yeah.
Right? Just like everybody else, it's a business now. Well, always was a business. You start as like a big supporter of Slack. How do you move forward now that Slack was purchased by, what was it, Salesforce?
Yeah.
So how are you navigating some of the feature releases that they're releasing? It's awfully similar to Slack, which they funded you first.
Yeah.
So it's almost kind of like a double whammy, a double whammy. So how are you navigating that? How are you dealing with that?
So, the Slack thing came about in a really interesting way. And we'd actually been trying to get a hold of them for a while because we always thought that it'd be a good fit from a funding perspective and obviously like a good acquisition strategy as well. So we tried to get a hold of them for a while. And then out of nowhere, I actually got this random message on LinkedIn from somebody I'd never met before. He sent me a message, said, hey, I built a startup kind of similar to yours a couple of years ago. We pivoted away from it, but you just want to like jam and talk about audio and startups and just kind of be there for each other. I'm just like, yeah, sure. Like, I'll hop on a call with you, random stranger from LinkedIn, who I never check my LinkedIn messages, by the way. I have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of spam messages.
No, you definitely don't.
Well, I did not mean to poke the bear here, but yeah, I don't. I truly don't. It's nothing personal, man. I don't check LinkedIn. So I happened to check this one message, and we hopped on a Zoom call, and we just talked, and it was just fun. And a couple months later, we hopped on another Zoom call and just talked, and it was just kind of a friendship thing.
Please don't
and
tell me this.
At the end of this, he's like, "Hey, do you want me to intro you to the Slack guys?" And I was like,
"Oh my God,
yeah,
oh.
like that'd be great." So he introduced me to the Slack fund. We talked. What's really cool is the initial funding that we did with them, we did completely over YAC. So like we never hopped on like live calls to do due diligence. It was all done async over YAC, which was really sweet because it really showed that they were like bought into the platform, right?
Right.
I had some conversations with Stuart at Slack about what it might look like for the early YAC team to go work at Slack. So, those conversations were there. I will say that the YAC or the Slack fund is very separated from Slack itself.
Good point.
So
okay.
When a lot of these features were coming out, we're asking our guys at the Slack fund, like, well, what's going on? And they're like, oh, I don't know. Is something coming out? And I went and checked. It doesn't really seem similar to you guys. I think you're fine. And then I started getting like pretty similar to us. And they were like, yeah, I don't know, man. I'll talk to them, see what's going on. Right. And I will say this. We had Etsy came to us and said, we've suddenly gone remote, COVID, all that stuff. Life is miserable here. Like we are just in 10 hours of meetings a day. We tried to do no meeting days. We tried to do meeting windows, like certain hours in which you could do meetings, but then that didn't work with like our offshore teams. And, we've done everything. We need an async solution. And so we, put together this whole thing for them. And they were like, oh, this is great. We're going to start using YAC. And literally, I think like a week later, Slack announced all of their stuff. And so the Etsy folks came back to us and they were like, you know what? We're already Slack users. Why would we pay for another software? We'll just use your stuff. And then we went and talked to them months later. Hey, did you guys end up using Slack clips? What was your experience like with it? Yeah, no, I think we sent like 1 or 2 voice messages on Slack and then never used it ever again. So optically, they definitely stole some users or features, whatever you want to say, right?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I've always felt like YAC needed to be its own standalone platform because voice messages have been baked into a lot of software. Skype, Microsoft Teams, like it's always had the little mic button. WhatsApp has it, right? But the point was that like you typically fall back to text or fall back to a phone call or whatever it might be because it's available and it's there for you. And people are lazy and they don't want to put effort out. And so what happens is like one person sends a voice message. The other person doesn't want to listen to it. Can you just tell me what you said? Yeah, I'm just going to type back. And then it's not a back and forth voice conversation anymore. It's just relegates right back to text. So I always felt like just simply shoehorning async voice feature into another platform was never really going to make a difference. And I think the adoption of Slack clips, like you can see that it really just did not have a huge impact. I think the feature is massively needed on a platform like Slack, but I don't think it replaces a dedicated meeting platform like YAC is meant to be. Just like people who with Slack still use Zoom, right? There's still a use case for this. We're not on an internal Slack call right now, right? Like Zoom has its own purpose, specifically works really well with like recording and external guests like myself right now. But technically speaking, you could have added me as a Slack Connect user and we could have all done a call over Slack. Like it just, it's not meant for that. It's not what it's for. And so YAC still has this like really important place that it deserves to be.
Yeah. You're just a better person than I am too. Like I can just tell, like,
I don't know about that.
I'm just saying you have this sense of like, okay, it's cool that you're releasing that. We're gonna do our own thing. I don't think that I could sleep knowing that I'm talking, and then they released it. But like, you got to get over it. You got to get over it. But
I learned early on that like just ideas are worthless. They just are. Like nobody has a good idea. It's all about execution. And so on my end, I'm just left here with, I just have to execute on it, right? It doesn't matter whose idea it was. If I came up with it first or Slack came up with it, who cares? I just have to execute on my vision.
And the interesting part about all of this is that like Microsoft Teams did that to Slack.
Right.
Literally copied the thing. And then all of a sudden, like if once you get to a certain point, you have to start engulfing feature sets into your main platform. So you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
So let's hit pause for a second and rewind to 2020. The world is instantly in this remote atmosphere. It's the pandemic, obviously, and everybody's just shutting down. So the audio craze was helped along by Clubhouse, and they obviously had some challenges with all the fast growth that they were experienced. But with YAC growing its user base by what, like 400%, how are you guys able to handle that quick growth? And talk a little bit about that experience.
We're fortunate in many ways. Well, I mean, I was fortunate to have accidentally built an audio startup and an audio renaissance and a remote work tool before the whole world went remote. I mean, we literally launched March of 2020, which like 2 weeks in is when everything shut down. We had no idea. Like that was just like pure happenstance with timing. And so I happened to pick like the two hot button things at just like the perfect time, and it worked out that way. But I will say, like, one of the magic things about YAC is that it's async, right? So like a server can't really go down because all we're doing is just like uploading files and then fetching them, right? Where there's no like real-time streaming of audio. So like our costs were really low and still maintained to be really low.
And you already
there's
had
not like a lot of
team,
server fees. So I have a 900-person offshore development team that I've been running for the last 10 years or so.
Right, because you built apps in your agency, so you were already prepared for this.
I didn't need bandwidth. I could just like grab extra devs as needed. I already had an agency, so I had designers that I could just bring over. So like from a scale perspective, it was like scale up for a little bit, build a bunch of apps. If we need to scale back down to save cash between funding rounds, we can. Then we can scale right back up instantly when we get another funding round. So like I was in a very optimum situation, both in terms of what I built, how we built it, how it worked, and my background. That just was a perfect storm of all this stuff that made this a little bit easier than I think most people will find it.
I loved Clubhouse, man. I think we hosted a Clubhouse room for 30 straight weeks or something.
Wow.
And in the beginning, it was great, the whole idea of audio. And then again, another example of every software company literally copying, just cannibalizing that poor, Twitter Spaces, Reddit Voices. Now everyone's doing something audio.
I gotta say, though, I'm kind of glad that the Clubhouse thing is over. Like I mean, I'm a huge proponent of async, obviously. But like,
and audio, of course.
I was so tired of getting invited to Clubhouse sessions that I had. I mean, I was literally like, we all went to an escape room, my wife and like a bunch of friends, and I'd already agreed to do a Clubhouse. And so I'm sitting outside of a Thai restaurant while all my friends and family are eating dinner in a car, moderating and running like a Clubhouse panel that someone invited me to. And I'm just sitting there like, could have just done this over YAC and like pre-recorded it and like done an async, and I'd be able to eat dinner. I don't know. I'm like really happy that the craze is done with, because it was such an inconvenience to my schedule to have to do all these scheduled Clubhouses.
Yeah, remote work Wednesdays. So, we've heard you talk about asynchronous a lot. For some of our listeners and some of our viewers who aren't quite up to speed with what asynchronous is, could you explain like what asynchronous is, and where do you see the future of asynchronous communication as part of remote work?
Yeah, I mean, async in general, we laughed at the start of this where I was like kind of making fun of Rick for, do you know what async means? Remote newbie. And, I joke.
Noob.
But
hence the hazing.
A lot of people don't know what async means, man. Like it's like even people in the remote world just don't understand the term. I mean, I tell them like,
spell it right now, Justin. Spell it right now.
Oh no, don't make me spell something live. I could type it. I don't want to. I could never do a spelling bee though. But a lot of people even hear like async meetings, and they're like, async meetings. Like, isn't that an oxymoron? Isn't a meeting a thing you do in real time, and async is not? Like, how can you combine those two things? And we are trying to maybe redefine and create a new category here of like meetings do not have to be in real time. But, for the listener, async means that you're doing something on your own time. It is not live. It is done asynchronously. There's the larger word there. That means there's a gap between the communication, right? So if I say something and you say something, we're going back and forth. If we're doing it over, let's say, iMessage, and you see those little typing bubbles, at the bottom, that's not asynchronous. That's actually real time. You can see that the other person is typing. It's instant messaging. I mean, back in the day, we had IM, right? We had AIM. That was a thing, right? Instant messaging. Slack is not asynchronous. You could probably use Slack asynchronously.
Right.
The tool is a real-time chat tool, right? It started as an IRC, alternative, right? It's all real time. And so async is purposeful delays, right? Email is an asynchronous communication method because I send something off, it is time-stamped. Someone does not typically get it instantly unless they're just sitting there hitting R on their keyboard, right? So async communication is purposefully delayed communication where you're saying, I'm going to say what I'm going to say, and then I'm going to leave, and then I'm going to come back to it. And maybe you've replied by that point in time. And inside of a company, what that looks like is calm, non-instant gratification workflows, right? And how that translates to your business is that you're able to work on your own time and not be dependent on somebody else's time. You're able to work in a different time zone, in a different, time slot, at a different speed than someone else, whatever that might be. There's a million variables here that you can pull out, but it just means that you're able to communicate without having to be monopolized. Like my time is not being monopolized by someone else just because they're available at this time does not mean that I have to make myself available. And async solves that problem.
Two things I love out of that, Rick. I love calm. Haven't heard that before. It's because you can take your time in relaying your message. So you can, I'm very calm right now, like a Snoop Dogg, right?
Easy. Nice and easy.
Yeah. Versus what most companies are is just reactive.
Yes.
And all over the place.
Absolutely.
Right?
So it's an it can wait mentality. That's what we talk about. The it can wait mentality, right? It's this idea that like, if you run your company a certain way, you don't have to have instant pants on fire communication all the time. You can actually run your company in a calm, it can wait mentality. And that means that I say what I want to say when I have my time and my availability and I feel it's important, but you don't have to answer right away. You can listen to it a couple times, form a good opinion, maybe get some supporting documentation, and then you can show me when you have time what your thoughts are. And we go back and forth like that, and it's calm, right? It's brought down a little bit.
I love this episode, babe. Smooth, baby.
Everything's cool. Everything's mellow.
We going Showtime Lakers here, baby. Yeah.
Yeah. Here we are on Soft Hits 92.9. Remember that radio station? I'm sorry, Justin. I just have a flashback of growing up in Maine. That's all.
Soft Hits. It's hilarious.
Anyway, that could be the theme of an async company for sure. So yeah, I mean that's where we start talking about these async meetings. Like, what is a meeting, right? Like you start to break that down, and it's like, okay, well, it's multiple people, 2 or more, talking about a subject, updating somebody, brainstorming, asking questions, solving problems, like all these different types of meetings. We have fancy names for them, right? With retrospectives, brainstorming.
Scrum.
Right? Scrum meetings, right? Problem solving meetings, discussions, decision making meetings. Like there's all these like titles, but at the end, it's just people talking. So like our idea was, what do you gain by having it done in real time? If anything, it just adds pressure and that time monopolization problem. You can't be doing something else at the same time. You're pulled out of what you're doing. It's distracting. But actually having a beat to think about something, listen to it again, form an intelligent response, it's actually really powerful in meeting the idea of meetings, right? If you're saying, hey, we want to solve a problem, having a little bit more time to think about the problem is actually a really powerful thing. And I don't think a lot of people understand that. They think, well, if it's a problem, we can just solve it right now. We need everybody online right now. We need to get all our brains together at the same time. And it's like, well, actually having some time for peace and quiet for me to form an opinion before I speak is actually really nice. And the other thing you gain is one thing that I think a lot of startups in general, especially founders, don't take into account is the different personalities on their team. Like not everybody likes to perform and be on all the time and be asked to, respond like that. I told you guys when we started, like I'm an easy interview. We could just start talking about anything and I'll come up with an answer and I'll keep the conversation going. Not everybody's like that though. That's okay. No. But for some reason, meetings make this strong assumption that everyone on your team that's invited to this meeting needs to have that personality trait of just being able to, react immediately, act in the moment, have a response queued up, and it's just not realistic.
Yeah, there's also tons of research out there that says, you know, we need to be together to brainstorm. There's tons of research that says, you know, most people need deep thinking time on their own to brainstorm. So that's kind of a poor excuse for a meeting. And then the last thing I just want to kind of say is, like, I'm on this kick of, don't trip about why you want people into the office. We want to see people. Like, if that's the purpose of a meeting, schedule a meeting and have fun. Yeah. You know what I mean? You don't like it's okay to admit that we need to be around each other to avoid isolation, loneliness, and to get to know each other. But we don't need to be around each other to work and have a meeting.
Absolutely. I think culture building is a huge thing that somehow gets blended with meeting culture. And it's like, no, like culture building can be its own thing, and you should do that and have a Netflix night where everybody watches a show together on Zoom, whatever that might be. Right. There's a lot of tools that are out there for it as well. It's very important. It has nothing to do with productivity, though.
Yeah.
So at this point, which is my favorite point of the podcast, tell us something funny about what may have happened to you while working remotely.
Oh man, I mean, I have so many stories. Like, it's unreal.
You could go rapid fire and then finish with an end one. I mean, it's your call. You could just go or just tell one story.
I'm gonna rattle them off. That meeting or that time in CES where we got that call from that VC. That same time period, we're all sitting in the hotel. We're having this insanely in-depth conversation about like evolution and the like origin of life and whether God exists. It was very like deep, right? And out of nowhere, someone just enters our hotel room and just looks at us and goes, "Hey, boys, do you need a light bulb?" And just walks over to the kitchen table and starts replacing our light bulbs. And we're like, "Dude, what are you doing? Like, you just walk into someone's hotel room. Like, how did you get in here?" He's like, "Well, I'm the maintenance guy." We're like, "You didn't even knock. You just opened the door and offered us a light bulb." We're all like freaking out. We're like, that is not okay. Or we like call the front desk and they're like, "Oh yeah, that's Jim. He does that."
That's Jim.
That's just Jim.
That is not okay at all.
That's like, what Jim does.
You cannot just enter someone's room unannounced. So we always remember that whenever we go to a hotel, we're always thinking about this guy walking to me. "Hey, you boys need a light bulb?" Just like the light bulb guy that just like comes in and changes your light bulb without permission. So that was one. I told you guys this at the beginning of the show, but as a remote worker, I enjoyed being able to go to a lot of conferences. I've been to CES a lot of times. I've been to F8. I've been to Oculus Connect. Like, I like going to all these conferences. It shows me just what's popular in technology, keeps me abreast of the latest trends. Yeah. So F8, I got E. coli at a Panera Bread. Yeah. That was
Panera's getting crushed today. I mean, first they were your free office.
They were my. I spent a lot of time in Panera's, man. Like, there was coffee and Wi-Fi. There was a lot going there, and then they sold me romaine lettuce, and I've been forever scarred since. So, yeah, the E. coli didn't hit me immediately. It did while I was in line for breakfast burritos at the conference, and that was an experience.
Sticky situation.
A runny situation. Had to trash those trousers. I did not get to experience the rest of the conference. I watched that all from the hotel room, which actually is a funny story in of itself. I won a scholarship to F8, in which they told me that all expenses were paid, and then showed me the hotels that were available. And so I picked the best hotel and the best room because I'd won the scholarship.
Of course you did.
So apparently the hotel cost wasn't covered, and they had forgotten to put that in any of the fine print. And so I was on the hook for a $5,000 hotel stay as a 20-year-old or something.
Oh my goodness.
That was an experience fighting with the Facebook staff to say, like, "You said all expenses were paid." "Well, we just meant the ticket to the conference, and they reimbursed for the flight or something like that, but they weren't going to cover the hotel, and they just didn't tell anybody." So of course I was like, "Oh, well, I'll pick the best hotel. Why not? There's still, a room available." So I was on the hook for a very expensive hotel at a very young age. We've had some great experiences as a team at YAC. One of the funniest things that's happened to us is Hunter, one of my co-founders, will continually like point out people or like manifest humans. Like it's the weirdest thing ever. So we were at CES. He just kept like fucking around with us. He was like, hey, there's Gary Vee. And we'd all turn around and be like, not again. Come on, stop messing with us. I mean, this happened like multiple times. And we're all walking through a hotel lobby and he goes, hey, there's Gary Vee. And we go, oh, come on, man. He goes, no, really? We turn around and Gary Vee's just like walking by us. And he just goes, hey, guys. Keeps going. I was like, what? You actually found Gary Vee? Like,
you actually did a really good Gary Vee impression. Like, it sounded like him just, hey, guys.
It's this nasally thing that he does. I watch all the TikTokers that impersonate him. They make me laugh.
You've seen it all. Well, Justin Mitchell, thanks so much for joining us. Where can our listeners find you?
Yeah, I am very active on Twitter. Sorry, I'm not active on LinkedIn, Kaleem.
We know.
So Twitter is the best place to reach me. Or, as Kaleem mentioned, yak.com/jmitch. That goes directly to my Yak. You can voice message me there.
That's the spot right
but
there.
Yeah, at jmitch on Twitter is the best place. Yak.com, YAC, that 3-letter domain. Definitely check it out. You can add me there. We can talk over async voice. I am super responsive. Always up to listen to anybody who has questions about fundraising, questions about tech, or how to build their startup, whatever it might be. Please use me as a free resource.
Well, please come back on our show because this has been awesome.
Anytime.
Nice. I haven't laughed this hard yet, so this is good.
Yeah, it's been a good one. Really appreciate it, man. Thank you so much for coming by.
Yeah, thank you guys.
We'll talk to you soon.
Later. Bye.
You've been listening to the Remotely We Are One podcast. Visit us at remotely1.com/podcast for upcoming episodes. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and download our episodes on your favorite podcast app.
Hey, don't forget to clock out.